Lieutenant Colonel Maya Reeves's worn leather briefcase hit the desk of Naval Air Station Coronado with a soft thud at 5:30 a.m., the same time it had for the past 4 years. The San Diego coastline stretched endlessly before her office window, as she methodically prepared for another day of invisibility. At 38, she looked older than her years, worn down by memories of a military career shattered by a man who now signed her performance reviews without recognizing her name. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The administration office where she worked smelled like printer, toner, and abandoned ambitions. Young officers strutted past her desk, calling her the paper pusher, with the casual cruelty of those who'd never faced real adversity. They'd toss their requisition forms at her with smirks, making jokes about women and bureaucracy while she processed their requests in perfect silence. "Hey, paper lady," called out Commander James Donovan, the 45-year-old base commander, as he dropped a stack of files on her desk without looking at her. "Make sure these priority transfers get processed by noon. That's UNO01, in case your civilian education didn't cover basic timekeeping." The junior officers behind him snickered. Maya said nothing, just picked up the papers with steady hands that had once commanded an entire carrier battle group in the Persian Gulf. None of them knew she'd orchestrated the most successful naval blockade in modern military history, or that her tactical innovations were still taught at Annapolis. Her call sign Valkyrie was whispered with reverence in certain Pentagon corridors, but here she was just another forgotten face in uniform. Her small apartment in the civilian sector of San Diego contained one bedroom, minimal furniture, and a collection of model ships arranged with military precision. The bookshelf held naval strategy texts and quantum physics journals, remnants of the dual doctorate she'd earned before her naval career. A worn metal case remained locked in her bedside drawer, unseen for years. Lieutenant Sophia Williams from the communications department was one of the few who showed Maya basic courtesy. She'd started at Coronado 6 months ago and noticed how the older woman carried herself spine straight, eyes alert, movements economical, like someone who'd spent years on a ship's bridge. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel," Sophia said, placing her requisition form properly on Maya's desk instead of tossing it. "Hope you had a good weekend." Maya nodded with the ghost of a smile. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "I did." In her breast pocket, Maya carried 3 items that never left her side: a folded photograph worn soft at the creases, a small silver compass that had belonged to her father, and a tarnished brass button from a dress uniform. Reminders of what she'd once been, what she'd lost, and what she'd promised herself she would reclaim. 4 years earlier, Captain Maya Reeves had stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, her uniform crisp, her commands clear and confident. At 34, she'd been the youngest woman to command a guided missile destroyer in the Pacific Fleet. The mission had been clear: establish a blockade to prevent illegal weapons from reaching insurgent forces threatening American allies. Admiral Eric Donovan, older brother to her current tormentor, Commander James Donovan, had personally selected her for the mission. "Your tactical mind is unmatched, Valkyrie," he'd told her. "This is why we invested in you." The blockade had been textbook successful for the first 3 weeks. Maya's innovative patrol patterns and signal intelligence protocols had intercepted 3 weapons shipments without a single casualty. The Pentagon was pleased, and there were whispers of a promotion to Rear Admiral before her 40th birthday. Then came the night that shattered everything. Intelligence had identified a merchant vessel suspected of carrying Chinese-made surface-to-air missiles. Maya's orders were to intercept, board, and search. Standard procedure with clear rules of engagement. "Sir," her executive officer had said, "Admiral Donovan is on a secure line. He's requesting to speak with you privately." The conversation that followed seemed routine. The Admiral confirmed her orders but added a curious detail. "Captain, If you find weapons on that vessel, you are to report directly to me before taking any further action. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," she'd responded, though the order had struck her as unusual. The boarding party found exactly what intelligence had predicted: 12 crates of advanced surface-to-air missiles with Chinese military markings. Maya followed protocol and ordered the contraband secured. Then she followed the Admiral's specific instruction and called him directly. "Sir, we've confirmed the presence of Chinese SAMs, exactly as intelligence suggested. Requesting permission to confiscate and detain as per standard protocol." The Admiral's response chilled her. "Captain Reeves, you are to return those crates to the vessel, release the ship, and falsify your reports to indicate no contraband was found." Maya had been stunned into momentary silence. "Sir, with respect, that would be a direct violation of preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That would be following a direct order from a superior officer, Captain." He'd cut her off. "I have my reasons. National security considerations above your clearance level. You will comply." She hadn't complied. That night, Maya Reeves made the decision that would end her command career but preserve her honor. She documented the weapons, confiscated them according to standard protocol, detained the vessel's crew, and filed an accurate report through the chain of command. Within 48 hours, she was relieved of command. The investigation that followed was a masterpiece of military injustice. Admiral Donovan claimed she had misunderstood his orders. The recording of their conversation mysteriously disappeared from the ship's logs. Her XO suddenly couldn't recall the specifics of what had happened. The official story became that Captain Reeves had overstepped her authority, damaged delicate diplomatic relations with a critical international partner, and demonstrated poor judgment under pressure. Her sterling record and previous commendations couldn't stand against the Admiral's influence. She wasn't court-martialed. That would have required a public hearing where she might have spoken freely. Instead, she was quietly reassigned to administrative duties. Her security clearance reduced, her career effectively ended. The brass button in her pocket came from the uniform she'd worn that last day on her ship's bridge. Now, 4 years later, she processed paperwork at the same naval base commanded by James Donovan, the Admiral's younger brother who had never served at sea, but had risen through the ranks on family connections and political savvy. He'd recognized her name when she was first assigned to his command, but had never connected her to the disgraced captain his brother had spoken of. To him, she was just another middle-aged female officer in an administrative role, invisible, irrelevant, and a convenient target for his casual disdain. Commander Donovan's leadership style relied heavily on public humiliation. Each Monday morning, he would gather the base personnel for what he called accountability reviews, but what everyone else called bloodbaths. He would select someone to make an example of dismantling their work, appearance, or performance with surgical precision, while others watched in silent relief that they weren't the target. Maya had endured 3 of these public dressings down in her 4 years. Each time, she'd stood at attention, eyes forward, face impassive, as Donovan questioned her competence, her attention to detail, and once, memorably, whether females above a certain age belonged in military service at all. Lieutenant Sophia Williams had witnessed the most recent incident 2 months ago. She'd watched in horror as the base commander had reduced a decorated officer, though Sophia didn't yet know about Maya's real background, to a verbal punching bag over a filing error that had actually originated in Donovan's own office. "Does it ever bother you?" Sophia asked Maya the next day, placing a coffee on her desk. "The way he speaks to people?" Maya had looked at her with eyes that seemed to see something far beyond the office walls. "There are worse things than words, Lieutenant." That cryptic response had sparked Sophia's curiosity. She began to notice discrepancies between Lieutenant Colonel Reeves's administrative skills, and her profound understanding of naval operations. Once, when Sophia was struggling with a tactical assessment, Maya had glanced at her computer screen and quietly suggested an approach that her instructors later praised as brilliantly innovative. Another time, when the base was conducting emergency response drills, Sophia had overheard Maya muttering corrections to the protocol under her breath corrections. That would have saved crucial minutes in a real crisis. Sophia began researching. Military records were classified, but there were traces of Valkyrie in naval journals and academic papers on tactical innovations. Connecting those dots to the quiet woman who processed requisition forms seemed impossible until she found a 10-year-old photograph in a Naval Academy publication. There stood a younger Maya Reeves, confident and commanding on a destroyer's bridge, with a citation noting her as the most promising tactical mind of her generation. The caption mentioned her call sign, Valkyrie. Sophia kept her discovery to herself, but her respect for Maya transformed into something approaching awe. Whatever had happened, whatever had relegated this brilliant commander to pushing papers, Sophia sensed it was an injustice of monumental proportions. Meanwhile, Commander James Donovan's star continued to rise. His brother, the Admiral, had been promoted to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, extending the family's influence even further. James boasted about it constantly, mentioning my brother, the Admiral, in nearly every conversation, as though the accomplishment were his own. The base was preparing for its annual inspection, a high-pressure event that would determine funding and resources for the coming year. Commander Donovan had been increasingly erratic, driving his staff with tyrannical intensity. The Admiral himself might attend, he announced during a staff meeting, preening visibly at the possibility. So everything must be perfect. Anyone who embarrasses me will regret it. His gaze had lingered on Maya as he said this. She had recently corrected a critical error in the base's emergency response plan, an error Donovan himself had introduced. Though her intervention had prevented a serious safety issue, he viewed it only as a challenge to his authority. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, he called out as the meeting was ending. Stay behind. The room emptied quickly, officers and enlisted personnel filing out with sympathetic glances toward Maya. She remained standing, posture perfect, eyes focused on a point just above Donovan's head. You think you're clever, don't you? He began, circling her like a predator, finding problems with my emergency protocols, making corrections without proper authorization. Sir, the safety of base personnel is my responsibility. He snapped, not yours. You're a paper pusher, Reeves. Nothing more. You've clearly forgotten your place. Maya remained silent, her face betraying nothing of the calculations running behind her eyes. The inspection is in 3 weeks, Donovan continued. You'll be front and center for it. I want every file, every form, every piece of paperwork in immaculate order. If there's so much as a paperclip out of place, I'll have you transferred to a weather station in Alaska. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. As Maya turned to leave, Donovan added with casual cruelty, And Reeves, do something about your appearance. You're representing my command. Try to look less worn. That evening, as Maya entered her apartment, the weight of 4 years of silent endurance pressed down on her shoulders. She opened her bedside drawer and removed the locked metal case for the first time in years. Inside lay the tangible symbols of a distinguished career: the Bronze Star, the Navy Cross, commendations for valor and exceptional service. Beneath them, a folded letter of commendation from the previous Chief of Naval Operations, praising her tactical innovations during the Gulf blockade. Her fingers traced the embossed seal of the United States Navy on each medal. For 4 years, she had accepted her fate with stoic resignation, believing that time would eventually reveal the truth about Admiral Donovan's corrupt order. She had trusted in the system, despite its flaws. But perhaps passive endurance wasn't enough. Perhaps it was time to take a more active role in reclaiming her honor. She didn't know that events were already in motion far beyond her small apartment. In Washington, D.C., a newly appointed Secretary of the Navy was reviewing historical operations as part of a broader assessment of naval readiness. The Gulf blockade had come under particular scrutiny for its unprecedented success rate. "I want to speak with the commanding officer who ran this operation," the Secretary had told her staff. "This Captain Reeves. Her tactical innovations could be valuable to our current challenges in the South China Sea." "Ma'am," a staff member had responded hesitantly. "Captain Reeves was reassigned. There was an incident involving Admiral Donovan." "What kind of incident?" "The records are sealed by order of Admiral Donovan himself." The Secretary's eyes had narrowed. "Unseal them. I want the complete file on my desk by morning." That same evening, as Maya polished her medals and contemplated her next steps, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. area code. "Lieutenant Colonel Reeves," she answered, her voice neutral. "This is Admiral Catherine Chun, Office of Naval Intelligence," came the response. "We need to talk about Operation Silent Watch and Admiral Eric Donovan." Maya's heart skipped a beat. After 4 years, someone was finally asking about the night that had ended her career. "I'm listening, Admiral." "Not over the phone. I'll be in San Diego tomorrow. Meet me at the Maritime Museum, 0900 hours. Come alone and tell no one." The line went dead, leaving Maya staring at the phone, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in 4 years, she felt something she'd nearly forgotten: hope. The next morning, Maya arrived at the Maritime Museum 15 minutes early, dressed in civilian clothes as instructed. She chose a bench overlooking the harbor, where she could observe all approaches. At precisely 0900, a woman in a tailored gray suit sat beside her. Admiral Catherine Chun was a legend in naval intelligence circles, brilliant, incorruptible, and known for her methodical dismantling of corruption within the ranks. "Lieutenant Colonel," Chun said without preamble, 4 years ago you refused an illegal order from Admiral Donovan to release Chinese weapons to insurgents. He retaliated by destroying your career. Is that an accurate summary? Maya maintained her composure despite her shock at hearing the truth stated so plainly. "Yes, Admiral. That's accurate. We've been building a case against the Donovan brothers for years. Eric's corrupt dealings with arms dealers, James's rapid promotions despite mediocre performance. But we've lacked hard evidence until now." Chun handed Maya a thin file. 3 days ago, a routine security upgrade recovered deleted communications from the USS Defiance's systems, including your conversation with Admiral Donovan. Maya opened the file with steady hands that belied her inner turmoil. There it was, the COFA transcript of the conversation that had changed her life, proof that she had followed proper protocol while the Admiral had attempted to subvert it. "Why are you showing me this?" Maya asked, though she suspected the answer. "Because in 48 hours, I will be announcing a full investigation into the Donovan brothers and their associates. And because the Secretary of the Navy has personally ordered your immediate reinstatement to active sea command." Chun paused. "But there's more. The Secretary has been so impressed by reviewing your tactical innovations that she's recommending you for promotion to Rear Admiral, pending Senate confirmation." Maya's carefully maintained composure nearly cracked. "Admiral, you've been patient, Lieutenant Colonel. You've endured injustice with dignity. Now I'm asking you for one more act of discretion. Return to your post. Continue your duties. Tell no one about our conversation. When Commander Donovan receives official notice of the investigation, I want to observe his unfiltered reaction. You want me to continue as if nothing has changed for just a little longer. The official orders will come through on Friday during the base inspection." Chun's expression softened slightly. "I understand this is asking a lot. Maya thought of the daily humiliations, the dismissive comments, the casual cruelty. 3. More days of maintaining her cover seemed a small price to pay for complete vindication. "I can do that, Admiral." Chun nodded, satisfied. The secretary also mentioned something interesting. "After the investigation concludes, Naval Air Station Coronado will need new leadership. Your name is at the top of her list." The implication was clear. Maya would not only be reinstated and promoted, she would become Commander Donovan's superior officer, possibly within the month. "One final thing," Chun said, retrieving a small box from her pocket. "The secretary thought you might want this back." Inside was Maya's original captain's insignia, the one she'd been forced to surrender 4 years ago. "For Friday," Chun explained. "A reminder of who you really are." As Maya walked back to her car, the weight of 4 years of silent endurance seemed to lift slightly from her shoulders. Justice was coming. Not through passive acceptance, but through the diligent work of those who recognized corruption and fought to expose it. For 3 more days, she would continue her role as the invisible paper pusher. But beneath that carefully constructed facade, Valkyrie was preparing to fly again. The base inspection was scheduled for 0900 on Friday. By 0700, Commander Donovan had already berated 3 junior officers and the chief, petty officer for perceived infractions in preparation. The base buzzed with nervous energy as personnel made final adjustments to uniforms and double-checked their areas of responsibility. Maya arrived at her desk at 0530, earlier than usual. Her paperwork was immaculate, every file precisely where it should be. She had spent the past 3 days ensuring that no detail could be criticized, no process questioned. At her apartment that morning, she had opened the small box Admiral Chun had given her. The captain's insignia gleamed in the early light, a tangible reminder of what had been taken from her and what would soon be restored. She had slipped it into her pocket, alongside the tarnished button, the compass, and the photograph. "Lieutenant." Colonel Sophia Williams appeared at her desk, looking nervous. "Commander Donovan wants everyone assembled in the main hall at 0830 for a pre-inspection briefing." "Thank you, Lieutenant." "I'll be there." Sophia hesitated. "He seems more on edge than usual." "I thought you should know." Maya nodded gratefully. In the past 3 days, she had begun to see Sophia as more than just a kind junior officer. Perhaps, in a different context, they might even become friends. The thought was unfamiliar but not unwelcome. The briefing was exactly what Maya expected. Commander Donovan pacing before his assembled personnel, reminding them of the inspection's importance to his not there, but his career progression. The inspection team includes representatives from Naval Operations and the Secretary's office, he announced, his voice tight with stress. "This isn't just about our base, it's about my record as your commander. Anyone who embarrasses me today will face consequences." His gaze landed on Maya, as it often did when he was making threats. "Lieutenant Colonel Reeves will ensure all administrative files are available for review. Try not to lose anything important the next hour, Colonel." The casual disrespect drew a few uncomfortable glances from the assembled personnel. Even those accustomed to Donovan's leadership style seemed to find this step too far. Maya said nothing, her expression revealing none of the knowledge she possessed. 3 more hours, she thought. Just 3 more hours. At precisely 0900, the inspection team arrived 5 naval officers in immaculate dress uniforms, led by a stern-faced captain Maya didn't recognize. Commander Donovan greeted them with effusive courtesy that contrasted sharply with his earlier demeanor toward his own staff. "Welcome to Naval Air Station Coronado, Captain Hendricks. We're honored to have you and your team with us today." The inspection proceeded according to standard protocol. The team divided to examine different areas of the base, operations, training facilities, equipment maintenance, and administration. Maya led the administrative review, presenting her meticulously organized files and documentation to a lieutenant commander who seemed impressed, despite his efforts to maintain a neutral expression. "Your record-keeping is exemplary, Lieutenant." "Colonel," he commented as they completed the review. "Some of the most organized files I've seen across 17 base inspections." "Thank you, sir. I believe in attention to detail." The inspection team reassembled in the main conference room at 1100 hours. Commander Donovan stood at the head of the table, confidence radiating from his posture. By all accounts, the inspection had gone flawlessly. His staff had performed exactly as instructed, each area of the base presenting as a model of naval efficiency. "Captain Hendricks, I trust you found everything in order?" Donovan's tone suggested he already knew the answer. Hendricks consulted his notes with deliberate slowness. "Commander Donovan, your base operations appear to be functioning adequately." The faint praise seemed to catch Donovan off guard. "Just adequately?" "Before we discuss the inspection results, I should inform you that we have one additional matter to address." Hendricks glanced at his watch. "We're expecting here they are now." The conference room door opened to admit two naval officers in dress blues. One was Admiral Catherine Chen, whom Maya recognized from their meeting. The other was a distinguished woman with silver hair and the insignia of the Secretary of the Navy. Commander Donovan's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and barely concealed panic. Everyone in the room stood at attention. "Madam Secretary," he stammered, "this is an unexpected honor. Had I known you would be joining us." "At ease, Commander," the Secretary said, her voice carrying natural authority. "This isn't a standard part of the inspection. Admiral Chun and I are here on a matter of specific importance to Naval Air Station Coronado." Chun stepped forward, producing an official document. "Commander James Donovan, I am serving you with notice of an official investigation into allegations of corruption, nepotism, and conduct unbecoming an officer, involving both yourself and your brother, Admiral Eric Donovan." The room fell silent. Maya maintained her perfect posture, revealing nothing of the vindication coursing through her veins. This is outrageous," Donovan sputtered, his face flushing red. "On what grounds? My record is impeccable. My brother is a member of the Joint Chiefs." "The evidence is substantial and compelling," Chun replied coolly, "including recovered communications from the USS Defiance revealing your brother's attempt to release confiscated Chinese weapons to insurgents 4 years ago, and his subsequent falsification of records to discredit the commanding officer who refused his illegal order." The Secretary turned toward Maya, who stood perfectly still among the other officers. "Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, would you step forward, please?" Maya moved with the precise economy of movement that had once made her one of the most respected ship commanders in the fleet. She stood before the Secretary, saluting crisply. "Lieutenant Colonel Maya Reeves, reporting as ordered, Madam Secretary." The Secretary returned the salute. "It is my duty and privilege to inform you that, effective immediately, you are reinstated to the rank of captain with all rights and privileges. Furthermore, by special order, you are promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral, lower half, pending Senate confirmation which is expected within the week." She handed Maya a document bearing the Navy's official seal. "The United States Navy formally apologizes for the injustice you have endured and recognizes your unwavering commitment to naval regulations and personal honor in the face of illegal orders and subsequent persecution." Commander Donovan's face had drained of all color. "Reeves?" he whispered, the pieces finally connecting in his mind. "You're that Reeves? From my brother's operation?" Maya turned to face him, meeting his eyes directly for perhaps the first time in 4 years. "Yes, Commander. That Reeves." The Secretary continued. "Additionally, Pending the investigation and effective immediately, Commander Donovan is relieved of command of Naval Air Station Coronado. She turned to Maya, Rear Admiral Reeves, as the senior officer present, and, given your exemplary record of service, you are hereby appointed acting commander of NAS Coronado until a permanent assignment is confirmed. The conference room erupted in whispers. Several officers looked at Maya with new understanding, connecting her quiet competence with the leadership role she was about to assume. "This is irregular," Donovan protested weakly. "There are protocols, procedures, all of which have been followed," Chun interrupted. "The orders are signed and authenticated. You will surrender command to Rear Admiral Reeves immediately, then report to my office in Washington for questioning regarding your involvement in your brother's activities." The secretary stepped closer to Maya. "Admiral Reeves, do you accept this command?" Maya removed the captain's insignia from her pocket, the one Chun had returned to her days earlier. "I accept the responsibility and the trust placed in me, Madam Secretary." "Then please change into appropriate insignia and assume command." As Maya replaced her Lieutenant Colonel oak leaves with the single star of a Rear Admiral, the room remained in stunned silence. Commander Donovan, now the former commander, stood rigid with shock and humiliation. The secretary addressed the room. "I expect every officer and enlisted person on this base to provide Admiral Reeves their full support during this transition. She has demonstrated the highest qualities of naval leadership under extraordinary circumstances. You would all do well to follow her example." With that, she nodded to Chun, and the two women prepared to depart. Before leaving, the secretary paused beside Maya. "The nation needs more officers with your integrity, Admiral. Welcome back to the fleet." As the door closed behind them, Maya faced the room of officers who had, until moments ago, seen her as nothing more than the paper pusher. Now they stood before their new commanding officer, struggling to reconcile the quiet woman who had processed their paperwork with the decorated naval tactician who would now determine their futures. "Commander Donovan," Maya said, her voice clear and authoritative, "you will report to my office in 1 hour to formally transfer command authorities and access codes. Until then, you are relieved." Donovan opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. With a stiff nod that couldn't quite conceal his fury and humiliation, he departed the conference room. In the sudden silence that followed, Maya surveyed the officers before her, some she knew well from years of quiet observation, others barely at all. Among them, Lieutenant Sophia Williams stood wide-eyed but smiling, perhaps the least surprised of anyone present. "As of this moment," Maya announced, "Naval Air Station Coronado begins a new chapter. I expect professionalism, integrity, and excellence from every person under my command. Those who demonstrate these qualities will find me a fair and supportive leader." She paused, letting her gaze touch each face in the room. "Those who prefer Commander Donovan's style of leadership may request transfers without prejudice." "Are there any questions?" No one spoke. The shock was still too fresh, the reversal too complete. "Then you're dismissed to your duties. Department heads will meet in my office at 1400 hours to begin the transition." As the officers filed out, many stole glances at her, seeing for the first time the natural authority she had carefully concealed for 4 years. Sophia lingered, waiting until they were alone. "Admiral," she said, testing the new title. "I knew there was more to you than paperwork." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you for your kindness, Lieutenant. It was noticed and appreciated, especially when it was in short supply. Permission to speak freely? Granted. What Commander Donovan did to you, the way he treated you when he thought you were just an administrative officer, it was wrong, not just because of who you really were, but because no one should be treated that way, regardless of rank or position." Maya nodded slowly. "An important lesson that many officers never learn, Lieutenant. Remember it when you have your Own command someday. Sophia straightened. Yes, Admiral. After Sophia left, Maya stood alone in the conference room. She removed the 3 items from her pocket: the tarnished uniform button, the compass, and the worn photograph. Tangible reminders of a journey from command to disgrace and back to command. The button she would keep a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that worth wasn't measured by the uniforms we wear. The compass had guided her through the darkest period of her career, helping her maintain her moral direction when all external validation had been stripped away. The photograph showed her on the bridge of the USS Defiance, surrounded by her crew, all of them looking to her for leadership. She would need to earn that trust again, from a new crew and a new command. Maya Reeves, Captain, Rear Admiral Valkyrie, walked toward the base commander's office that would now be hers. Her steps were measured and confident, each one carrying her further from the identity she had been forced to adopt and closer to the leader she had always been. 4 years of paper pushing hadn't diminished her abilities or her resolve. If anything, they had honed her patience, deepened her empathy, and strengthened her commitment to leading with integrity. Commander Donovan had thought he was humiliating an insignificant officer. Instead, he had been unknowingly preparing his replacement. As she approached the commander's office, personnel in the hallway stood straighter, saluting with new respect. Maya returned each salute with precise military courtesy. She wasn't naive enough to believe that respect came simply with the rank. She would need to earn their true confidence through her actions in the coming weeks and months. But for now, for this moment, it was enough to have reclaimed her rightful place. Not for vengeance or personal vindication, though those feelings were undeniably sweet, but because the Navy needed leaders who understood that integrity wasn't negotiable and that every person under their command deserved respect regardless of rank or role. In that sense, her 4 years in administrative exile hadn't been wasted at all. They had been her most important command lesson, one she would carry forward into everything that came next. Commander James Donovan sat rigidly across from Maya. In what was now her office, his face a mask of barely controlled fury as she methodically worked through the command transfer protocols. The spacious room still contained his personal items, naval awards, family photographs, and the ornate model ships he displayed prominently despite never having commanded at sea. "You've been planning this," he accused, his voice low and venomous. "All these years filing my paperwork, you were just waiting for the right moment to strike." Maya continued reviewing the access codes without looking up. "No, Commander. I was doing my job with integrity, the same way I commanded my ship. The difference is that this time, the truth finally came to light. My brother is a war hero. The Joint Chiefs will never allow this witch hunt to continue." Now Maya did look up, her gaze level and unflinching. "Your brother gave an illegal order that would have armed insurgents with Chinese weapons. When I refused to comply, he destroyed my career. These aren't allegations, Commander. They're facts, supported by recovered communications that your brother thought he'd erased." Donovan's composure cracked further. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. The Donovan family has connections throughout Washington. This temporary victory of yours will be short-lived." "Perhaps," Maya acknowledged, her tone neutral. "But right now, I'm your commanding officer, and you have a transport to catch to Washington. Admiral Chun doesn't appreciate being kept waiting." The former base commander stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "This isn't over, Reeves. That's Admiral Reeves, Commander. And yes, for you, it is over." She gestured to the door. "You're dismissed." After Donovan stormed out, Maya allowed herself a moment alone in the sudden silence. She ran her fingers along the polished wood of the commander's desk, her desk now, feeling the strange disconnection between her present reality and the 4 years of careful invisibility that had preceded it. The office door opened after a brief knock, and Captain Hendricks from the inspection team entered. "Admiral," The secretary asked me to remain at Coronado during the transition to provide any assistance you might need. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. Maya gestured to a chair. I'll need a complete briefing on the base's current operations. The view from administrative processing is somewhat limited. Hendricks smiled slightly. Of course, Admiral. Though I suspect you've observed more than most people realized. The next hours passed in a blur of briefings and introductions. Department heads who had barely acknowledged Maya's existence now presented detailed reports on their areas of responsibility. Some seemed genuinely pleased by the change in command. Others were clearly calculating how the shift in power would affect their careers. Maya listened carefully to each, noting not just what they said, but how they said it, who took responsibility for problems, who deflected blame, who had creative solutions rather than just identifying issues. She was building a mental map of her new command, identifying strengths to leverage and weaknesses to address. By evening, she had conducted initial meetings with every key leader on the base. Her final appointment was with Lieutenant Sophia Williams, whom she had asked to stay behind after the communications department briefing. Lieutenant, Maya began when they were alone, you showed kindness to someone you believed was just an administrative officer. That speaks to your character. Sophia straightened in her chair. Thank you, Admiral. I need people I can trust during this transition. People whose judgment isn't clouded by politics or ambition. Maya studied the younger woman thoughtfully. I'm appointing you as my aide-de-camp effective immediately. The position comes with a promotion to lieutenant commander. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. I'm honored, Admiral, but I've only been at Coronado for 6 months. There are more experienced officers who spent years ignoring or actively participating in Commander Donovan's leadership style. Maya finished for her. I don't need experience in that tradition. I need fresh perspectives and unwavering integrity. You've demonstrated both. Later that night, Maya finally returned to her small apartment, carrying a box of personal items to make the commander's office, her office, feel more like her own. The sudden transformation of her circumstances felt surreal after so many years of patient endurance. Her phone rang as she was unpacking. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. number she didn't recognize. Admiral Reeves, she answered, still unaccustomed to the title, Maya. The voice belonged to Admiral Catherine Chun. I thought you should know that. Commander Donovan arrived in Washington and has been officially notified of the full scope of the investigation. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. He's demanding legal representation and claiming this is all a politically motivated attack on his family. There was a pause. The evidence against both brothers is substantial. Our forensic team has recovered years of communications showing a pattern of arms smuggling and profiteering. Maya sat heavily on her couch. How deep does it go? Deep enough that several high-ranking officers will likely face court-martial. The secretary is personally overseeing the investigation to ensure it can't be derailed by political connections. After they disconnected, Maya stood at her apartment window, looking out at the lights of San Diego Harbor. Ships moved through the darkness, their navigation lights tracing patterns across the water. For 4 years she had been grounded, stripped of command, relegated to processing papers for officers who couldn't recognize her worth. Now she was Rear Admiral Reeves, acting commander of one of the Navy's most important installations. The vindication was profound, but so was the responsibility. This wasn't just about her personal redemption, it was about restoring integrity to a command that had been corrupted by the Donovan brothers' influence. Maya's first week as base commander revealed the full extent of that corruption. Departmental audits uncovered irregular procurement practices, suspicious personnel transfers, and training deficiencies that had been concealed from official reports. James Donovan had run Coronado as a personal fiefdom, rewarding loyalty over competence and cutting corners to make his performance metrics look better than reality warranted. It's worse than we thought, Maya told Lieutenant Commander Williams as they reviewed the latest findings. Basic maintenance schedules have been falsified. Equipment certifications are months overdue. If we had an actual emergency, half our response systems might fail. Sophia looked troubled. How could this continue for so long without oversight? Catching it? Because the oversight was compromised, Maya explained. Admiral Eric Donovan made sure his brother's command was evaluated by friendly inspectors who were willing to look the other way. The magnitude of the problems demanded decisive action. Maya instituted a base-wide stand-down for comprehensive safety evaluations. She reorganized departments based on competence rather than loyalty to the previous regime. Officers who had enabled Donovan's worst practices were reassigned to positions where they could do less damage. Not everyone appreciated these changes. A core group of officers who had benefited from Donovan's favoritism resisted the new standards, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly. Captain Lawrence Reed, the operations officer who had been Donovan's right hand, was particularly vocal. During a staff meeting in Maya's second week, he challenged her directly. "With all due respect, Admiral," he said, his tone suggesting very little respect indeed. "These constant audits and reorganizations are damaging morale and disrupting essential functions." Commander Donovan had systems in place that worked. Maya regarded him steadily. "They worked for whom, Captain?" "The maintenance records were falsified. Training certifications were outdated. Personnel evaluations were based on loyalty rather than performance." She leaned forward slightly. "Those systems may have worked for Commander Donovan's career advancement, but they placed this base and its personnel at risk." Reed's face flushed. "The commander had his methods. His methods were corrupt." Maya cut him off, her voice level but firm. "And they will not continue under my command." "Is that clear, Captain?" The operations officer fell silent, but the resentment in his eyes spoke volumes. Maya made a mental note to watch him closely in the coming weeks. As she navigated these internal challenges, Maya was also preparing for a more public test. The Secretary of the Navy had scheduled a press conference to announce the investigation into the Donovan brothers and to formally introduce Rear Admiral Reeves as the new commander of NAS Coronado. The evening before the press conference, Maya found herself standing before her bedroom mirror in her dress whites, the Rear Admiral's star gleaming on her shoulder boards. The uniform fit perfectly. Admiral Chun had arranged for it to be waiting in Maya's office on her first day, but it still felt strange after 4 years in the more subdued uniform of a lieutenant colonel. Her phone chimed with a text message from Sophia. "CNN running a preview story on tomorrow's announcement. You might want to see this." Maya turned on her television to find a reporter standing outside the Pentagon, speaking with practiced gravity. Sources within the Department of the Navy confirmed that tomorrow's announcement will detail a major corruption investigation involving Admiral Eric Donovan, currently serving on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The investigation reportedly centers on illegal weapons transactions and abuse of power spanning several years. The screen showed a photograph of Admiral Donovan in his dress uniform, looking authoritative and distinguished. In a related development, the reporter continued, "Command of Naval Air Station Coronado has been transferred to Rear Admiral Maya Reeves, who sources describe as a tactical prodigy, whose career was derailed after she refused illegal orders from then-Captain Eric Donovan during a classified operation 4 years ago." Maya's own official Navy photograph appeared on screen, not a current image, but one from her days commanding the USS Defiance. She looked younger, confident, with the intensity of a rising star in the fleet. Admiral Reeves' reinstatement and promotion are being characterized as a correction of a historical injustice within the Navy's command structure. Tomorrow's press conference is expected to. Maya switched off the television, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The public vindication was gratifying, but it also meant that every aspect of her career, including its painful derailment, would now be subject to public scrutiny and discussion. Her phone rang again. This time it was Admiral Chun. "I assume you've seen the news," Chun said without preamble. "Yes, Admiral. It seems our timeline has been accelerated. Someone leaked details to the press. We're investigating, but it's likely one of Donovan's allies trying to control the narrative before we can make the official announcement." Chun sounded irritated, but not surprised. "The secretary has moved up the press conference to 0900 tomorrow. A car will pick you up at 0800. After they disconnected, Maya returned to the mirror, studying her reflection. The uniform, the insignia, the medals, they were external symbols of her restoration. But the real victory was internal, the vindication of her decision to uphold her oath, even when it cost her everything. For 4 years, she had maintained her integrity in silence, doing her duty even when that duty involved processing paperwork for officers who treated her with contempt. Now she would need to demonstrate that same integrity under the bright lights of public attention and in the face of resistance from those who had prospered under the old regime. The press conference the next morning was a carefully orchestrated affair. The Secretary of the Navy made the formal announcements about the investigation into the Donovan brothers, followed by the introduction of Rear Admiral Maya Reeves as the new commander of NAS Coronado. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she kept her remarks brief and focused on the future rather than the past. "The United States Navy has a proud tradition of honor, courage, and commitment," she told the assembled journalists. "My focus at Naval Air Station Coronado will be on upholding those core values and ensuring that every sailor and officer under my command has the training, equipment, and leadership they need to fulfill our mission of national defense." The questions that followed were predictably focused on the scandal rather than her plans for the base. "Admiral Reeves, do you feel vindicated after 4 years of being wrongfully demoted?" "My personal feelings are less important than the Navy's commitment to correcting the situation and restoring proper command integrity," she replied evenly. "Will you be testifying against Admiral Donovan at his court-martial?" "I will fulfill whatever obligations are required of me during the investigation, but my primary focus is on my current command responsibilities." After the formal press conference, Maya found herself momentarily alone with the secretary in a side room. "You handled that well, Admiral," the older woman said approvingly. "The temptation to publicly celebrate Donovan's downfall must be considerable." Maya shook her head slightly. "This isn't about celebration, ma'am. It's about restoration, not just of my career, but of proper leadership at Coronado." The secretary studied her thoughtfully. "You know, when we first uncovered the evidence of what really happened on the Defiance, there were those who argued against your reinstatement. Not because they questioned your innocence, but because they worried that someone who had been treated so unjustly might return seeking vengeance rather than leadership. And what persuaded you otherwise?" "Your service record during those 4 years in administration," the secretary replied. "No complaints, no bitterness on record. Just steady performance of your duties regardless of how far beneath your abilities they were. That kind of patient integrity is rare, Admiral Reeves. It's exactly what the Navy needs right now." Upon her return to Coronado, Maya found the base buzzing with reaction to the press conference. Personnel who had previously ignored her now watched with undisguised curiosity as she walked through the facilities. Some seemed genuinely pleased by the developments. Others were clearly anxious about what changes might come next. Captain Reed was waiting in her office, his expression carefully neutral. "Admiral, we need to discuss the operational readiness report due to Pacific Command next week." "Of course, Captain." "Have a seat." As Reed outlined the report requirements, Maya noticed subtle discrepancies between his verbal summary and the documentation he provided. It was exactly the kind of obfuscation that had allowed problems to go unaddressed under Donovan's command. "This training completion rate seems unusually high," she observed. pointing to a figure in the report draft. Especially considering what our recent audit uncovered. Reed stiffened slightly. Commander Donovan had an established methodology for calculating those figures. A methodology that involved counting partial completions as full completions and excluding certain personnel categories from the denominator, Maya stated flatly. That ends now, Captain. I want accurate figures, not manipulated ones. Admiral, if we submit these numbers without adjustment, Coronado will show the lowest readiness rating in the Pacific Fleet. It will reflect poorly on the base and its leadership. It will reflect the truth, Captain Reed, which creates the foundation for actual improvement rather than continued deception. Maya fixed him with a steady gaze. I'm not concerned with how the numbers look. I'm concerned with the reality they represent. Reed's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Yes, Admiral. After he left, Sophia entered with a stack of personnel files. You wanted to review the officer evaluation reports that were pending when you took command. Yes, thank you. Maya gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Stay if you would. I'd like your perspective. As they worked through the evaluations, a pattern emerged. Officers who had been close to Donovan had received glowing assessments regardless of their actual performance, while those who had maintained professional distance from the commander's inner circle had been rated more harshly. This can't continue, Maya said, setting aside a particularly egregious example. These evaluations shape careers and determine promotions. They need to reflect reality, not personal loyalty. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. It's like there were two different bases operating in the same space, the real Coronado with all its flaws and challenges, and the perfect Coronado that existed only in official reports. Exactly. And we can't fix problems we won't acknowledge. Maya leaned back in her chair, considering. Lieutenant Commander, I want you to arrange a town hall meeting with all department heads and senior enlisted personnel. It's time for some radical transparency. The town hall took place 3 days later in the base's largest briefing room. Every senior leader on the base was present, along with chief petty officers representing the enlisted perspective. The tension in the room was palpable as Maya took her place at the podium. Thank you all for coming, she began. I've called this meeting because we need to address the reality of where Naval Air Station Coronado stands today, not where previous reports claimed it stood. She activated a large screen behind her, displaying a detailed assessment of the base's actual operational readiness, maintenance backlogs, training deficiencies, and personnel issues. The numbers were stark and for many in the room, shocking. This is our starting point, Maya continued, her voice calm but authoritative. Not what we wish were true, not what would look good in reports to higher command, but the unvarnished reality we're facing. A murmur ran through the assembled leaders. Captain Reed sat stone-faced in the front row, while others looked concerned or even alarmed by the data. Now I want to be clear about something, Maya said, her gaze sweeping the room. This is not about assigning blame for how we got here. This is about taking collective responsibility for where we go next. She clicked to the next slide, showing a comprehensive improvement plan with clear milestones and accountability measures. Starting today, every report that leaves this base will reflect actual conditions, not wishful thinking. Every evaluation will be based on performance, not personal relationships. Every training certification will represent real proficiency, not paper compliance. Maya paused, allowing her words to sink in. I know this approach is different from what many of you have become accustomed to. Some may find it uncomfortable or even threatening. But let me be absolutely clear. The culture of deception that has taken root at Coronado ends now. Captain Reed raised his hand, his expression challenging. Admiral, with respect, these changes will make us look terrible compared to other installations. We'll be at the bottom of every comparative metric. Initially, yes, Maya acknowledged. But I'm less concerned with how we look than with what we are. And right now, what we are is a base that has prioritized appearance over substance, with potentially dangerous consequences for our personnel and our mission. She stepped out from behind the podium, addressing them more directly. I spent 4 years in this base's administration department, watching as reports were massaged, figures were adjusted, and inconvenient truths were buried. I processed the paperwork that obscured reality rather than revealing it. And I did so because my duty required it, even when I recognized the patterns of deception. The room had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on her. But my duty now requires something different from me and from all of you. It requires courage, the courage to face our deficiencies honestly so that we can address them effectively. It requires commitment to improvement rather than impression management. And above all, it requires honor to serve with integrity even when that's the harder path. Maya allowed her gaze to touch each face in the room, from the most senior officer to the newest chief petty officer. Some of you may not be comfortable with this new direction. If that's the case, I understand, and I will support your transfer to other commands where my leadership approach may be a better fit for you. But for those who choose to stay, I promise you this: we will rebuild Naval Air Station Coronado into an installation that succeeds through genuine excellence, not artificial metrics. And when we do, that success will belong to all of us. As the meeting adjourned, Maya noticed the varied reactions among her leadership team. Some looked energized by the challenge, others uncertain, and a few, Captain Reed among them, barely concealed their resentment. The coming weeks would reveal who was truly committed to the new direction and who would resist it. That evening, as Maya reviewed the day's events in her office, Sophia arrived with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "Admiral, there's something you should know. I've heard rumors that Captain Reed has been in communication with Commander Donovan despite the explicit instructions that no one on base should contact him during the investigation." Maya accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "Not surprising, but concerning. Do we have any evidence beyond rumors?" "Nothing concrete yet. But there's more chatter about resistance to the new transparency measures. Some officers are calling it a witch hunt against Donovan loyalists." "Also not surprising," Maya considered for a moment. "We're asking people to change not just procedures but mindsets. That never happens without resistance." Sophia hesitated before asking, "How did you do it, Admiral?" 4 years of being dismissed and underestimated, watching as corrupt practices flourished around you. How did you maintain your integrity without becoming bitter?" Maya looked out her office window at the evening activity on the base sailors. Moving between buildings, aircraft being serviced, the constant motion of a naval installation that never truly slept. "I remembered something my father taught me when I was young," she said finally. "He was a career Navy man too, never made it past lieutenant commander because he refused to play politics. He told me that integrity isn't something you display when it's convenient or recognized. It's something you maintain, especially when no one is watching and no one seems to care." She turned back to Sophia with a slight smile. "During those 4 years, I focused on what I could control: my own actions, my own standards, and trusted that the truth would eventually matter. It took longer than I expected, but here we are." The younger officer nodded thoughtfully. "That's a perspective I need to remember." "We all do," Maya replied. "Because this transformation isn't going to happen overnight, and there will be setbacks along the way. The question isn't whether we'll face resistance, it's how we respond to it." As Sophia left, Maya returned to the window, watching the base that was now her responsibility. The challenge ahead was formidable, changing not just policies and procedures, but an entire culture that had developed under corrupted leadership. But as she studied the sailors moving purposefully across the grounds, men and women who deserved honest leadership and proper support, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years, the deep satisfaction of commanding with integrity. Without compromise, in full alignment with the oath she had taken when she first put on the uniform. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be those who clung to the old ways, who resisted transparency, who undermined her efforts to restore proper standards. But Maya Reeves, Rear Admiral, Valkyrie, Commander, was prepared for the fight. After 4 years of patient endurance, she had been given a second chance not just to reclaim her career but to make a difference in the lives of those under her command. And this time, no one would take that from her without a battle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Maya completed her daily run, a ritual she had maintained even during her years in administrative exile. Running had been her sanctuary, the one place where she could feel like herself, powerful, in control, moving with purpose toward a clear destination. Now, as she circled the base perimeter in the early light, sailors and officers acknowledged her with respectful nods and salutes that still felt strange after years of invisibility. 6 weeks had passed since she had taken command of Naval Air Station Coronado. 6 weeks of methodical assessment, difficult conversations, and strategic changes that had upended the comfortable corruption of the Donovan era. The resistance she had anticipated had materialized quickly, led by Captain Reed and a core group of officers whose advancement had depended on the previous commander's favoritism. Their opposition took various forms: passive-aggressive compliance, selective interpretation of directives, and a persistent campaign of whispered criticism designed to undermine her authority. Maya had expected this and met it with calm persistence, neither ignoring the resistance nor allowing it to distract her from the larger mission of transformation. After he left, Sophia entered with a stack of personnel files. "You wanted to review the officer evaluation reports that were pending when you took command?" "Yes, thank you." Maya gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Stay, if you would. I'd like your perspective." As they worked through the evaluations, a pattern emerged. Officers who had been close to Donovan had received glowing assessments regardless of their actual performance, while those who had maintained professional distance from the commander's inner circle had been rated more harshly. "This can't continue," Maya said, setting aside a particularly egregious example. "These evaluations shape careers and determine promotions. They need to reflect reality, not personal loyalty." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. It's like there were 2 different bases operating in the same space: the real Coronado with all its flaws and challenges, and the perfect Coronado that existed only in official reports. "Exactly. And we can't fix problems we won't acknowledge." Maya leaned back in her chair, considering. "Lieutenant Commander, I want you to arrange a town hall meeting with all department heads and senior enlisted personnel. It's time for some radical transparency." The town hall took place 3 days later in the base's largest briefing room. Every senior leader on the base was present, along with chief petty officers representing the enlisted perspective. The tension in the room was palpable as Maya took her place at the podium. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I've called this meeting because we need to address the reality of where Naval Air Station Coronado stands today, not where previous reports claimed it stood." She activated a large screen behind her, displaying a detailed assessment of the base's actual operational readiness, maintenance backlogs, training deficiencies, and personnel issues. The numbers were stark and, for many in the room, shocking. "This is our starting point," Maya continued, her voice calm but authoritative. "Not what we wish were true, not what would look good in reports to higher command, but the unvarnished reality we're facing." A murmur ran through the assembled leaders. Captain Reed sat stone-faced in the front row, while others looked concerned or even alarmed by the data. "Now I want to be clear about something," Maya said, her gaze sweeping the room. "This is not about assigning blame for how we got here. This is about taking collective responsibility for where we go next. She clicked to the next slide, showing a comprehensive improvement plan with clear milestones and accountability measures. Starting today, every report that leaves this base will reflect actual conditions, not wishful thinking. Every evaluation will be based on performance, not personal relationships. Every training certification will represent real proficiency, not paper compliance. Maya paused, allowing her words to sink in. I know this approach is different from what many of you have become accustomed to. Some may find it uncomfortable or even threatening. But let me be absolutely clear, the culture of deception that has taken root at Coronado ends now. Captain Reed raised his hand, his expression challenging. Admiral, with respect, these changes will make us look terrible compared to other installations. We'll be at the bottom of every comparative metric. Initially, yes, Maya acknowledged. But I'm less concerned with how we look than with what we are. And right now, what we are is a base that has prioritized appearance over substance, with potentially dangerous consequences for our personnel and our mission. She stepped out from behind the podium, addressing them more directly. I spent 4 years in this base's administration department, watching as reports were massaged, figures were adjusted, and inconvenient truths were buried. I processed the paperwork that obscured reality rather than revealing it. And I did so because my duty required it, even when I recognized the patterns of deception. The room had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on her. But my duty now requires something different from me and from all of you. It requires courage, the courage to face our deficiencies honestly so that we can address them effectively. It requires commitment to improvement rather than impression management. And above all, it requires the honor to serve with integrity, even when that's the harder path. Maya allowed her gaze to touch each face in the room, from the most senior officer to the newest chief petty officer. Some of you may not be comfortable with this new direction. If that's the case, I understand, and I will support your transfer to other commands where my leadership approach may be a better fit for you. But for those who choose to stay, I promise you this: we will rebuild Naval Air Station Coronado into an installation that succeeds through genuine excellence, not artificial metrics. And when we do, that success will belong to all of us. As the meeting adjourned, Maya noticed the varied reactions among her leadership team. Some looked energized by the challenge, others uncertain, and a few, Captain Reed among them, barely concealed their resentment. The coming weeks would reveal who was truly committed to the new direction and who would resist it. That evening, as Maya reviewed the day's events in her office, Sophia arrived with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. Admiral, there's something you should know. I've heard rumors that Captain Reed has been in communication with Commander Donovan despite the explicit instructions that no one on base should contact him during the investigation. Maya accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Not surprising, but concerning. Do we have any evidence beyond rumors? Nothing concrete yet. But there's more chatter about resistance to the new transparency measures. Some officers are calling it a witch hunt against Donovan loyalists. Also not surprising, Maya considered for a moment. We're asking people to change not just procedures but mindsets. That never happens without resistance. Sophia hesitated before asking, How did you do it, Admiral? 4 years of being dismissed and underestimated. Watching as corrupt practices flourished around you. How did you maintain your integrity without becoming bitter? Maya looked out her office window at the evening activity on the base sailors. Moving between buildings, aircraft being serviced, the constant motion of a naval installation that never truly slept. I remembered something my father taught me when I was young, she said finally. He was a career Navy man two never made. It passed lieutenant commander because he refused to play politics. He told me that integrity isn't something you display when it's convenient or recognized. It's something you maintain, especially when no one is watching and no one seems to care. She turned back to Sophia with a slight smile. During those 4 years, I focused on what I could control: my own actions, my own standards, and trusted that the truth would eventually matter. It took longer than I expected, but here we are. The younger officer nodded thoughtfully. That's a perspective I need to remember. We all do, Maya replied. Because this transformation isn't going to happen overnight, and there will be setbacks along the way. The question isn't whether we'll face resistance, it's how we respond to it. As Sophia left, Maya returned to the window, watching the base that was now her responsibility. The challenge ahead was formidable. Changing not just policies and procedures, but an entire culture that had developed under corrupted leadership. But as she studied the sailors moving purposefully across the grounds, men and women who deserved honest leadership and proper support, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years: the deep satisfaction of commanding with integrity, without compromise, in full alignment with the oath she had taken when she first put on the uniform. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be those who clung to the old ways, who resisted transparency, who undermined her efforts to restore proper standards. But Maya Reeves, Rear Admiral, Valkyrie, commander, was prepared for the fight. After 4 years of patient endurance, she had been given a second chance, not just to reclaim her career but to make a difference in the lives of those under her command. And this time, no one would take that from her without a battle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Maya completed her daily run, a ritual she had maintained even during her years in administrative exile. Running had been her sanctuary, the one place where she could feel like herself, powerful, in control, moving with purpose toward a clear destination. Now, as she circled the base perimeter in the early light, sailors and officers acknowledged her with respectful nods and salutes that still felt strange after years of invisibility. 6 weeks had passed since she had taken command of Naval Air Station Coronado. 6 weeks of methodical assessment, difficult conversations, and strategic changes that had upended the comfortable corruption of the Donovan era. The resistance she had anticipated had materialized quickly, led by Captain Reed and a core group of officers whose advancement had depended on the previous commander's favoritism. Their opposition took various forms: passive-aggressive compliance, selective interpretation of directives, and a persistent campaign of whispered criticism designed to undermine her authority. Maya had expected this and met it with calm persistence, neither ignoring the resistance nor allowing it to distract her from the larger mission of transformation. As she completed her final lap, she noticed Lieutenant Commander Sophia Williams waiting near the administration building, a tablet in hand and concern evident in her expression. "Good morning, Admiral," Sophia greeted her. "I apologize for interrupting your run, but there's a situation developing that needs your immediate attention." Maya fell into step beside her aide. "What's happened?" "Pacific Command has moved up our readiness evaluation. They'll be here on Monday." Maya absorbed this news without breaking stride. Under normal circumstances, a base would have at least a month's notice before such a high-stakes evaluation. The accelerated timeline could only be interpreted as a deliberate challenge. "Reed's allies at Pacific Command," she surmised, "trying to catch us mid-transformation when our numbers are most vulnerable." Sophia nodded grimly. "That's my assessment as well." Captain Reed seemed suspiciously unsurprised when the notification came through. They entered the headquarters building, the air conditioning a stark contrast to the morning heat. Junior officers and enlisted personnel snapped to attention. As Maya passed, their reactions ranging from genuine respect to careful neutrality. "Call a meeting of all department heads for 0900, Maya instructed as they reached her office. "No preparation, no rehearsed briefings. I want raw status reports on where each department actually stands." "Yes, Admiral." Sophia hesitated. "There's one more thing." A message came through from Washington this morning. Admiral Eric Donovan has resigned from the Joint Chiefs, citing personal reasons. The investigation remains classified, but rumors suggest he's negotiating a plea deal. Maya absorbed this information with a complex mixture of emotions. The architect of her career's derailment was finally facing consequences, yet the victory felt hollow compared to the immediate challenge facing her command. Interesting timing, she observed. His resignation followed immediately by an accelerated readiness evaluation of our base, almost as if someone wants to prove that his removal and my appointment were mistakes. What's our approach, Admiral? Maya's expression was resolute, absolute transparency. We present our actual readiness status, without embellishment or excuse. We show them exactly where we are in the recovery process, what we've addressed, and what remains to be fixed. No false metrics, no manipulated data. That's a risk, Sophia pointed out. Our numbers won't match the artificially inflated standards that Pacific Command is accustomed to seeing. It's the only approach consistent with the changes we're trying to make. Maya settled behind her desk, already mentally mapping out the coming confrontation. Integrity isn't just a word we use in speeches, Lieutenant Commander. It's either the foundation of everything we do, or it's nothing at all. The department head meeting that followed was tense but productive. Maya laid out the situation without mincing words. Pacific Command's evaluation team would arrive in 5 days, and they would be looking for evidence that Coronado was floundering under new leadership. We will not engage in the kind of deceptive practices that were standard procedure under the previous command, she told her assembled leadership team. We will present our actual status, along with clear plans for addressing deficiencies. This is a test, not just of our operational readiness, but of our commitment to honest assessment and genuine improvement. Captain Reed couldn't quite hide his skeptical expression. Admiral, with respect, if we present the unvarnished data, we'll fail this evaluation. The comparative metrics against other bases will be devastating. I'm less concerned with how we compare to bases that may be engaged in the same deceptive practices, Maya replied evenly. I'm concerned with establishing a foundation of integrity that will support real improvement, not the illusion of excellence. She turned to the maintenance department head. Commander Taylor, what's the actual status of our aircraft readiness? The commander glanced nervously at Captain Reed before answering. If we use the standard reporting methodology, we're at 89% readiness. If we use the actual functional status of each aircraft, we're at 72%. And why the discrepancy? The standard methodology counts aircraft as ready if they're awaiting parts that have been ordered, even if they can't actually fly. It also counts aircraft with certain non-critical discrepancies as fully mission-capable. Maya nodded. From now on, we report the 72% figure with a clear explanation of the counting methodology, and we accompany that with our plan to address the actual maintenance issues, not just the reporting discrepancies. She continued around the room, department by department, insisting on honest assessments rather than the massaged figures that had become standard practice. Some leaders embraced this approach with evident relief. Others, particularly those closest to Reed, seemed alarmed by the implications. I understand this feels uncomfortable, Maya acknowledged as the meeting concluded. We've all been conditioned to focus on making the numbers look good rather than making the base actually be good. But that changes now. Pacific Command can evaluate our current status however they choose, but they will be evaluating our actual status, not a fabricated version designed to protect careers at the expense of readiness. As the department heads filed out, Captain Reed lingered, his expression carefully neutral. Admiral, I feel obligated to register my professional concern about this approach. It places the entire base at risk of an unfavorable evaluation that could affect funding, resources, and personnel allocations. Maya met his gaze directly. Your concern is noted, Captain. But consider this. The approach you're advocating continuing to present, manipulated data that masks real problems, has already placed this base at risk in far more significant ways. It's created a culture where appearance matters more than reality, where genuine issues go unaddressed because they're hidden behind favorable metrics. That's a philosophical position, Admiral. Pacific Command deals in concrete performance indicators. Then let's give them truly concrete indicators, Captain, not artificial constructs designed to avoid accountability. Maya's tone was firm, but not confrontational. This base will succeed or fail based on its actual performance, not its skill at massaging statistics. After Reed departed, Sophia closed the office door and turned to Maya with an expression of concern. He's going to fight you on this every step of the way. I know. Maya began reviewing the notes from the meeting. And he's not alone. There are officers throughout this command who built their careers on the previous system. They see transparency as a threat rather than an opportunity. Because for them, it is a threat, Sophia observed. If evaluations are based on actual performance rather than relationship management, some of them won't fare well. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Which is precisely why this readiness evaluation is so important. It's our first opportunity to demonstrate that honest assessment, even when it reveals problems, is more valuable than deceptive reporting that conceals them. The 5 days leading up to the evaluation were among the most intense of Maya's career. Department heads worked around the clock to compile accurate status reports and develop credible improvement plans. Some embraced the new transparency with enthusiasm, relieved to finally acknowledge problems they had long been forced to conceal. Others complied reluctantly, clearly skeptical that honesty would be rewarded in a system that had historically valued appearance over substance. Captain Reed maintained a facade of cooperation while subtly undermining the effort at every opportunity. Maya heard reports of him meeting privately with certain officers, though the content of those conversations remained unclear. She chose to focus on the work at hand rather than engaging in counterproductive confrontations. On Sunday evening, the night before the evaluation team's arrival, Maya walked the base alone, observing the preparations in each department. Unlike previous inspections, where cosmetic improvements often took precedence over functional ones, the focus now was on ensuring systems actually worked, procedures were actually followed, and personnel were actually trained according to standards. She paused outside the maintenance hangar, where aircraft technicians were conducting genuine repairs rather than the superficial cleanups that had previously been standard practice before evaluations. Chief Petty Officer Garcia, a 20-year veteran who had seen commanders come and go, approached her with a respectful nod. "Evening, Admiral," he greeted her. "First time I've seen actual maintenance happening before an inspection, instead of just making things look pretty. How's morale, Chief?" Maya asked, genuinely interested in the enlisted perspective that officers sometimes missed. "Mixed, ma'am. Some of the younger sailors are confused by the changes. They've only known the old way of doing things, make it look good, worry about fixing it later." Garcia gestured toward the hangar where his team continued working. "But most of the senior NCOs were with you. Been waiting years for someone to care more about whether the birds can actually fly than whether the paperwork says they can." Maya smiled slightly. "That's good to hear, Chief. Permission to speak freely, Admiral, always. Some of the officers aren't happy. There's talk that you're setting the base up for failure, that Pacific Command won't appreciate the honesty." Garcia's weathered face showed concern. "But down in the enlisted ranks, most of us have been wanting someone to finally acknowledge the real problems so we can fix them properly. Thank you for that perspective, Chief. It matters." As Maya continued her walk through the darkening base, she reflected on Garcia's words. The divide wasn't simply between those loyal to the previous commander and those embracing her leadership. It was between those who had benefited from the system of appearances and those who had been forced to manage the gap between reported readiness and reality. The evaluation team arrived precisely at 0800 the next morning. 5 senior officers, led by Rear Admiral Victor Coleman, a contemporary of Eric Donovan, known for his by-the-book approach and exacting standards. His expression as he greeted Maya suggested he had already formed opinions about what he would find. "Admiral Reeves," he said with perfunctory courtesy, "I trust you have your base prepared for our evaluation. We're prepared to show you exactly where Naval Air Station Coronado stands, Admiral Coleman," Maya replied, emphasizing the word exactly, including areas where we excel and areas where improvement is still needed. Coleman's eyebrow rose slightly at this departure from the standard assurances of excellence. "I see. Well, let's proceed with the briefing, shall we?" The initial briefing set the tone for the entire evaluation. Instead of the carefully crafted presentations designed to highlight strengths and obscure weaknesses that had been standard under Donovan, Maya began with a comprehensive overview of the base's actual status, the good, the bad, and the areas in transition. "As you can see from these figures," she explained, indicating a chart displaying aircraft readiness, "our actual mission-capable rate is 76%, up from 72% 6 weeks ago when I assumed command. Our goal is 85% by the end of the quarter, which we believe is both ambitious and achievable based on our current maintenance capacity and parts availability." Admiral Coleman frowned at the numbers. "These figures are significantly lower than what Coronado has reported in previous evaluations." "Yes, sir," Maya acknowledged without hesitation. "Previous reports used a different counting methodology that included aircraft awaiting parts, or with certain discrepancies as fully mission-capable. We've adjusted our reporting to reflect aircraft that can actually perform their designated missions today, not those that theoretically could if certain conditions were met." Coleman exchanged glances with his team. "That's an unusual approach, Admiral Reeves." "It's an honest approach, Admiral Coleman. And it's the only one that allows us to identify and address real deficiencies rather than concealing them behind favorable metrics." The evaluation proceeded through each department, following the same pattern: accurate reporting of current status, clear acknowledgement of deficiencies, and specific plans for addressing them. Maya noticed Captain Reed growing increasingly uncomfortable as the evaluation team's skepticism gradually shifted to reluctant respect for the transparency being demonstrated. By mid-afternoon, Admiral Coleman requested a private meeting with Maya in her office. "This is the most unusual readiness evaluation I've conducted in 15 years, he began once they were alone. "I've never had a command voluntarily present. Unfavorable data that wasn't specifically requested. Would you prefer that we had concealed those issues, Admiral?" Maya asked directly. Coleman considered this. "What I prefer isn't relevant. What concerns me is that these numbers, if formalized in my report, will place Coronado near the bottom of comparative rankings for Pacific Fleet installations." "I understand that, sir. But I would argue that those rankings, if based on artificially inflated figures from other commands, have limited value in assessing actual readiness." "That's a systemic critique, Admiral Reeves. My responsibility is to evaluate this base according to established standards." Maya leaned forward slightly. "With respect, sir, your responsibility is to provide an accurate assessment of this base's actual readiness to perform its mission. If the established reporting standards obscure rather than reveal that readiness, perhaps it's the standards that need re-evaluation, not our approach to them." Coleman was silent for a long moment, studying her with an expression that mingled irritation and reluctant admiration. "You realize that some will interpret this transparency as an admission of failure under your command. I'm more concerned with actual failure than perceived failure, Admiral. A base that looks good on paper but can't perform its mission has already failed, regardless of what the metrics suggest." After Coleman departed to rejoin his team, Maya remained in her office, reflecting on the conversation. She had no illusions about the potential consequences of her approach. If Pacific Command chose to interpret Coronado's honest self-assessment as evidence of leadership failure, her recently restored career could face another setback. Yet she felt a certainty that transcended career considerations. The path of integrity might be more difficult, but it was the only one that would lead to genuine improvement rather than the perpetuation of comfortable deceptions. The evaluation team completed their assessment late that evening after a comprehensive review of all departments. Admiral Coleman's final briefing was scheduled for 0900. The following morning, the formal presentation of findings that would shape Coronado's reputation and resources for the coming year. That night, Maya received an unexpected visitor in her office as she prepared for the next day's briefing. Chief Garcia knocked quietly at her open door, his expression troubled. "Admiral, got a minute?" "Of course, Chief. What's on your mind?" Garcia closed the door before speaking. "Ma'am, there's something you should know. Captain Reed has been meeting with some of the junior officers, telling them to prepare documentation showing that readiness has declined under your command compared to Commander Donovan's tenure." Maya's expression remained neutral despite her concern. Evidence of actual decline or manipulated figures to create that impression. "The second one, ma'am. He's comparing your honest numbers to Donovan's inflated ones to make it look like you've driven the base into the ground in 6 weeks. Garcia looked genuinely angry. "It's not right, Admiral. You're the first commander who's actually cared about fixing the real problems instead of just covering them up. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Chief. I appreciate your integrity." After Garcia left, Maya contacted Sophia, who confirmed the Chief's information through her own sources. Captain Reed was indeed preparing a parallel presentation for Admiral Coleman, one designed to undermine Maya's leadership by contrasting her honest assessments with Donovan's deceptive ones. "What's our response, Admiral?" Sophia asked, clearly concerned. "If Reed presents those comparative figures without context, it could seriously damage the evaluation results." Maya considered her options carefully. She could confront Reed directly, but that might escalate the situation without resolving it. She could prepare a counter-presentation that explained the methodological differences, but that would feel defensive and might lend credibility to Reed's approach. "We stay the course," she decided finally. "We present our honest assessment, we acknowledge the challenges, and we demonstrate our plan for addressing them. If Admiral Coleman can't recognize the difference between integrity and deception, that's beyond our control." Sophia looked uncertain. "That's a significant risk to take, Admiral." "The greater risk would be compromising the principles I've asked this base to adopt," Maya replied. "We can't advocate for transparency and integrity when it's convenient, then abandon those values when they're tested." The morning of Admiral Coleman's final briefing arrived with an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Maya had slept little, not from anxiety about the evaluation results, but from planning how to maintain the base's new direction regardless of those results. She was determined that Coronado would continue its trajectory toward genuine readiness, rather than reverting to the comfortable deceptions of the past. The base's senior leadership gathered in the main conference room, with Captain Reed noticeably positioning himself near Admiral Coleman rather than with the other department heads. Maya nodded acknowledgement to each officer as they entered, maintaining the calm authority that had become her trademark. When everyone was seated, Admiral Coleman began without preamble. "After a comprehensive evaluation of Naval Air Station Coronado, my team has reached several conclusions that I'll share with you now." He opened a folder containing his formal report. "First, the base's current operational readiness as presented by Admiral Reeves shows significant discrepancies from previous evaluations under Commander Donovan." Captain Reed couldn't quite suppress a satisfied expression. "However," Coleman continued, Further investigation reveals that these discrepancies result not from declining performance, but from fundamentally different reporting methodologies. Admiral Reeves has implemented what she terms functional readiness reporting rather than the standard metrics used throughout the fleet. He looked directly at Maya. This approach is unconventional and creates complications for comparative analysis. It also reveals a level of transparency that, frankly, is unprecedented in my experience as an evaluator. The room had gone completely silent, every officer intent on understanding where this assessment was leading. Captain Reed has provided my team with comparative data suggesting performance decline under Admiral Reeves' command. Coleman glanced at Reed, whose expression remained carefully neutral. However, when adjusted for methodological differences, the data actually indicates measurable improvement in several key areas, particularly maintenance completions, training certifications, and personnel readiness. Maya kept her expression professional, but she couldn't help feeling a surge of vindication. Admiral Coleman had recognized the substance beneath the figures, not just the figures themselves. My formal recommendation to Pacific Command will be to authorize additional resources for Coronado's ongoing improvement efforts, with the stipulation that Admiral Reeves provide quarterly progress reports using both her functional readiness metrics and the standard fleet measurements. Coleman closed his folder with an air of finality. I will also recommend that other installations consider adopting elements of this more transparent reporting approach, appropriately modified for fleet-wide consistency. The implications were clear. Not only had Maya's approach been validated, but elements of it might be implemented more broadly. It was a vindication that went beyond her individual command to potentially influence the entire Pacific Fleet. Thank you, Admiral Coleman, Maya responded formally. We appreciate your thorough evaluation and welcome the opportunity to demonstrate continued improvement. As the meeting concluded and officers began to disperse, Coleman approached Maya privately. An unconventional approach, Admiral Reeves, but an effective one. You've given me considerable food for thought regarding our evaluation standards. That wasn't my primary intent, sir, but I'm pleased if it contributes to broader improvement. Coleman nodded thoughtfully. You know, when I was assigned this evaluation, certain individuals at Pacific Command suggested I would find a base in disarray under inexperienced leadership. Instead, I found a commander with the courage to acknowledge problems as the first step toward solving them. He glanced toward Captain Reed, who was speaking with several junior officers across the room. Not everyone appreciates that kind of leadership, but those who matter do. After Coleman and his team departed, Maya called a meeting of her senior leaders to discuss the evaluation results and next steps. Captain Reed attended, but remained uncharacteristically silent throughout, his earlier confidence visibly diminished by Coleman's assessment. When the meeting concluded, Maya asked him to remain behind. Once they were alone, she addressed him directly but without recrimination. Captain, your attempt to undermine this command's approach to readiness reporting was noted by both myself and Admiral Coleman. Reed stiffened slightly but didn't deny the accusation. I was providing comparative data that I believed was relevant to the evaluation, Admiral. You were attempting to create an artificial contrast between Commander Donovan's deceptive reporting and our transparent assessment. Maya's tone remained professional rather than accusatory. That approach is inconsistent with the culture of integrity we're building at Coronado. With respect, Admiral, I've served under 4 different commanders at this base. Each had their own approach to readiness reporting. Commander Donovan's methods were accepted practice throughout his tenure. Accepted doesn't mean appropriate, Captain, and past practice doesn't justify continued deception. Maya studied him thoughtfully. You have a choice to make. You can continue to resist the changes we're implementing, or you can contribute your considerable experience to making those changes successful. I hope you'll choose the latter, but I'm prepared for either decision. Reed seemed momentarily taken aback by the directness of this approach. He had clearly expected a more punitive response. "And if I choose to continue my current approach, then I'll arrange your transfer to a command where your perspectives align more closely with leadership expectations." Maya's expression softened slightly. "But I'd prefer not to lose your expertise, Captain. You know this base better than most. That knowledge would be valuable if applied to genuine improvement rather than resistance to change." After Reed departed, visibly thoughtful but non-committal, Sophia entered with the day's updated reports. "That went better than expected," she observed. "Both the evaluation and your conversation with Reed." Maya nodded, feeling a profound sense of validation, not just in Coleman's assessment, but in the subtle shifts she had observed throughout her command over the past 6 weeks. Department heads who had initially been skeptical were now embracing the new standards. Enlisted personnel were showing increased initiative now that their observations about systemic problems were being heard, rather than dismissed. "It's just the beginning," she told Sophia. "Changing a culture doesn't happen in weeks or even months. But we've established the foundation, the expectation that integrity matters more than appearances, that problems are acknowledged rather than concealed, that leadership means facing reality rather than managing perceptions." As she looked out her office window at the base that was now undeniably hers, not just in title, but in direction and values, Maya felt a sense of purpose that transcended the personal vindication of her restored rank and command. What mattered wasn't that she had reclaimed her career, but that she was using that career to implement the principles she had maintained even during her years of exile. The true measure of leadership, she reflected, wasn't found in the heights to which one rose, but in the integrity one maintained regardless of position. She had proven that truth during 4 years of patient endurance in administrative obscurity. Now she was proving it again, not through patience alone, but through the active courage to challenge a system that valued appearance over substance. And in that challenge lay the path not just to personal redemption, but to genuine transformation, the kind that could extend far beyond one base to influence an entire organization, the kind that began with one leader refusing to compromise, even when compromise seemed the easier path. The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long shadows across Coronado's grounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistance, new opportunities to choose integrity over expediency. But for now, in this moment, Maya allowed herself to acknowledge how far they had already come, from paper pusher to commander, from silent witness to transformation catalyst, from patient endurance to active courage. The journey wasn't complete, such journeys never truly were. But the direction was clear, the foundation solid, and the purpose worthy of every sacrifice it required. 3 months after Admiral Coleman's evaluation, Naval Air Station Coronado pulsed with a different energy. The transformation that had begun with Maya's appointment had taken root in ways both measurable and intangible. Aircraft readiness had climbed to 84%, just shy of their quarterly goal. Training certifications reflected actual proficiency rather than perfunctory compliance. Personnel evaluations now highlighted genuine contributions rather than political connections. But the most significant change was in the base's culture. Officers who had initially resisted the new transparency had either adapted or transferred. Those who remained had embraced a standard where problems were identified openly and solved collaboratively rather than concealed for fear of career repercussions. Maya stood at the window of her office, watching flight operations on the distant runway with quiet satisfaction. The squadrons based at Coronado were flying more hours with fewer maintenance issues, a direct result of addressing actual problems rather than manipulating the reporting of them. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Lieutenant Commander." Sophia Williams entered with a tablet and an expression that mixed professional decorum with barely suppressed excitement. "Admiral, the final results from Pacific Fleet's quarterly readiness comparison have arrived." Maya turned from the window, her expression questioning. And Coronado ranks third among 17 comparable installations in overall mission readiness, Sophia reported. When Admiral Coleman's recommended dual reporting methodology is applied, we actually rank first in functional readiness, the measure of actual capability rather than reported status. Maya absorbed this news with measured satisfaction. And Captain Reed's department? Operations ranks second fleet-wide, up from 11th under the previous reporting system. Sophia couldn't quite hide her smile. He's requested a meeting. With you, Admiral. I believe he may have had a change of perspective. The transformation in Captain Lawrence Reed had been perhaps the most unexpected development of the past 3 months. After initially leading the resistance to Maya's leadership approach, he had gradually shifted from grudging compliance to active support. His expertise in base operations, once applied to maintaining appearances, was now directed toward genuine improvement. Schedule him for 1,400 hours, Maya decided, and arrange for the quarterly results to be shared with all department heads. Immediately. This achievement belongs to everyone who embraced our new direction. The base will miss your leadership, Admiral. But Captain Reed is a solid choice for interim command. His transformation has been remarkable to witness. People can surprise you, Maya observed, especially when given the opportunity to align their actions with their better values. She gathered her notes from the meeting. I have one more task for you before my departure, Lieutenant Commander. I'd like you to prepare a comprehensive history of Coronado's transformation over the past 4 months. The challenges, the resistance, the breakthroughs. It will serve as both documentation and potentially a template for other installations. A case study in cultural change, Sophia nodded, understanding the assignment's significance. I'll make it a priority. The following weeks passed quickly, filled with transition planning and preparation for Maya's new role in Washington. She met individually with each department head, ensuring continuity of leadership and reinforcement of the principles that had guided Coronado's transformation. Her final meeting was with Chief Petty Officer Garcia, whose early support had provided crucial insight into the enlisted perspective on the changes she was implementing. The word among the chiefs is that you're taking our approach to the whole fleet, Garcia said when they met in her office. Can't say I'm surprised. What you've built here works too well to keep it just at Coronado. What I've built with considerable help from people like you, Chief, Maya corrected gently. This transformation wasn't the work of one admiral. It required every sailor and officer willing to embrace a different way of operating. Garcia nodded acknowledgement. Still, it needed someone to start it, to show it was possible. He hesitated before adding, permission to speak freely, Admiral. Always, Chief. The Navy did you wrong 4 years ago. Anyone else would have come back looking for payback, for vindication. Instead, you came back focused on making things better, not just for yourself, but for everyone. The veteran chief's weathered face showed genuine respect. That's the kind of leadership people remember long after you've moved on to your next assignment. On her final day at Coronado, Maya stood on the reviewing stand as the base personnel assembled for a formal change of command ceremony. The formation stretched across the parade ground, sailors and officers standing at attention under the California sun, a visible representation of the community she had helped transform. Captain Reed stood beside her, his uniform immaculate, his bearing reflecting the responsibility he was about to assume. The past 4 months had changed him profoundly, from a defender of deceptive practices to an advocate for the transparency that had initially threatened him. As the ceremony proceeded with its traditional rituals and formalities, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 4 years earlier, she had stood on another parade ground, watching as her command was stripped away based on false accusations and manipulated evidence. She had accepted that injustice with dignity, continuing to serve in whatever capacity remained available to her. Now as she prepared to transfer temporary command to Reed before departing for Washington, she recognized that her years in administrative exile hadn't been merely a painful interlude to be endured. They had been a crucial part of her development as a leader, teaching her the importance of maintaining integrity even when it brought no external reward, showing her how systems could be corrupted by prioritizing appearance over substance, and revealing the true character of those around her through their treatment of someone they believed had no power. The ceremonial transfer of command completed, Maya stepped to the microphone for her farewell address. Looking out at the assembled personnel, from the most junior sailors to the senior officers who had helped implement her vision, she felt a profound connection to this community she had helped transform. 4 months ago, I assumed command of Naval Air Station Coronado with a simple but challenging mandate to restore integrity to our operations, our reporting, and our culture, she began. Many believed this was an impossible task. Institutional practices are notoriously resistant to change, especially when those practices have become comfortable despite their dysfunction. The assembly remained silent, hundreds of faces focused on her words. What I discovered was that most of you were hungry for precisely this change, for the opportunity to acknowledge problems, honestly so they could be solved effectively, for the freedom to prioritize actual performance over the appearance of performance, for the satisfaction of genuine achievement rather than manipulated metrics. Maya paused, making eye contact with individuals throughout the formation. Chief Garcia with his knowing expression, young officers who had embraced the new standards with enthusiasm, senior enlisted personnel whose practical wisdom had guided the implementation of abstract principles. The transformation we've achieved together isn't measured primarily in improved readiness statistics, though those have certainly followed. It's measured in the culture we've created, one where integrity isn't just a word in a mission statement, but a daily practice that shapes every decision and action. She gestured to Captain Reed, standing at attention beside her. Under Captain Reed's leadership, this transformation will continue. He has demonstrated through both word and deed his commitment to the principles that now guide this base. I have absolute confidence in his ability to maintain our course while finding new opportunities for improvement. Maya looked out at the assembled personnel one final time, feeling a connection that transcended rank and roll. 4 years ago, I learned that a career built on integrity can withstand even the most determined efforts to destroy it. Today, I'm privileged to witness a community built on that same foundation, strong enough to thrive regardless of who holds command, resilient enough to face challenges honestly rather than concealing them deceptively. She concluded with words that reflected both her personal journey and the collective achievement they had realized together. The measure of leadership isn't found in rank or title, but in the positive change that outlasts one's tenure. By that measure, what we've built together at Coronado represents the highest form of success, not just improved performance, but improved character. As the ceremony concluded and the formation dispersed, Maya found herself surrounded by officers and enlisted personnel wanting to express their appreciation and good wishes. The genuine warmth of these interactions confirmed what she had sensed throughout her command, that the commitment to integrity she had championed resonated deeply with people who had grown weary of pretense and manipulation. Later that afternoon, as she prepared to depart for Washington, Maya visited her office one final time. The space had been cleared of her personal items, ready for Captain Reed to make it his own during her absence. Yet something of her influence would remain, embedded in the culture and practices of the base she had helped transform. Sophia arrived to accompany her to the waiting car. "Everything's ready for your departure, Admiral. Your quarters in Washington have been arranged, and the advisory committee members have been notified of the initial meeting next week. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander." Maya took a final look around the office where she had begun Coronado's transformation. Have you completed the documentation I requested? Yes, Admiral. Sophia handed her a tablet containing the comprehensive history of the base's changes over the past 4 months. I've included quantitative metrics, qualitative assessments, and personal testimonials from personnel at all levels. It's as complete a record as I could assemble. Maya nodded appreciation as they walked toward the exit. This will be invaluable. In Washington, the committee needs to understand that what we've achieved here isn't theoretical. It's a proven approach with measurable results. As they reached the headquarters building entrance, Maya paused for a moment, looking out at the base that had been her command. Aircraft moved along distant taxiways, maintenance crews worked on equipment, sailors and officers went about their duties with purpose and precision. The scene looked much as it had when she first arrived. Yet the substance beneath the appearance had been transformed completely. You know, she said thoughtfully, when I was assigned here after years in administration, I thought it was simply about personal vindication, the restoration of my career after an injustice. But it became something much more significant. The transformation of an entire command culture, Sophia suggested. And potentially the beginning of a larger institutional change. Maya turned to her aide with a slight smile. Which is why the work in Washington matters so much. What we've built here needs to become the standard throughout the fleet, not the exception. As they walked to the waiting car that would take Maya to her flight, they passed the administrative building where she had spent 4 years processing paperwork, invisible and underestimated. The memory brought no bitterness, only a deeper appreciation for how that experience had prepared her for the leadership challenges that followed. I've been thinking about what makes lasting change possible, Maya said as they reached the vehicle. It's not just policy or procedure. It's the alignment of individual values with institutional practices, creating systems where doing the right thing is also the expected thing. That's what you established here, Sophia observed. And what you'll help establish fleet-wide through the advisory committee. Maya nodded thoughtfully. The challenge in Washington will be different, more political, more resistant to fundamental change. But the principles remain the same. Acknowledge reality honestly, address problems transparently, and measure success by actual improvement rather than reported metrics. As she prepared to enter the car, Maya looked back at Naval Air Station Coronado one final time. The base gleamed in the afternoon sun, its operations flowing with the precision and purpose she had helped instill. In 4 months, she had transformed a command corrupted by appearance management into one dedicated to genuine excellence. In 6 months, she would return to continue that work, bringing with her the policy changes needed to institutionalize their approach throughout the fleet. But even if circumstances prevented her return, if political forces or institutional resistance diverted her path, what they had built together would endure. Captain Reed and others like him would maintain the culture of integrity that had taken root. Sailors and officers who had experienced the difference between deceptive reporting and honest assessment would carry that knowledge throughout their careers. The principles she had championed would continue to influence operations long after her individual leadership had ended. That, Maya reflected as the car pulled away, was the true measure of leadership, not the height to which one rose, but the lasting positive change one created. Not the power one wielded, but the principles one embedded so deeply that they outlasted any individual leader's tenure. 4 years in administrative exile had taught her patience and perspective. 4 months in command had given her the opportunity to transform that patience into action, that perspective into vision. The coming months in Washington would test whether that vision could expand beyond one base to influence an entire service. As Naval Air Station Coronado receded in the distance, Maya felt not the satisfaction of completed work, but the anticipation of work just beginning. The transformation of a culture, built on appearance into one founded on integrity, was a journey without a final destination. An ongoing commitment to choosing substance over shadow. Reality over representation, truth over convenience. It was a journey she had begun alone in the silent dignity of unjust emotion. Now it continued with the collective commitment of hundreds who had experienced the difference between leadership based on deception and leadership grounded in integrity. And in that continuation lay the most meaningful vindication of all, not the restoration of rank or the validation of personal worth, but the enduring impact of principles that would shape the institution long after the individuals who championed them had moved on to new challenges and opportunities. The transformation of Naval Air Station Coronado was just the beginning. The transformation of the Navy's approach to readiness and reporting lay ahead. And beyond that, perhaps, the transformation of how leadership itself was understood and practiced throughout the service. Maya Reeves, Rear Admiral, future Vice Admiral, once disgraced captain, former administrative officer, settled into her seat as the car merged onto the highway, her thoughts already turning to the challenges awaiting her in Washington. The past had brought its lessons, the present its opportunities. The future would bring new tests of the principles she had maintained, even when they brought no reward. She was ready for whatever came next, carrying with her the quiet strength that had sustained her through years of patient endurance and the clear vision that had guided Coronado's transformation. Base Commander Donovan had once humiliated her publicly, never imagining she would become his superior officer. Now that chapter had closed, and a new one was beginning, one with the potential to influence not just one base or one command, but an entire institution's approach to integrity, accountability, and genuine excellence. The legacy of what they had built at Coronado would continue, regardless of who held the title of commander. And in that continuation lay the true success of leadership, not personal advancement, but positive change that outlasted one's individual tenure. If you enjoyed Maya's incredible journey from humiliation to triumph, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. We share amazing true stories of ordinary people who refuse to let circumstances define them. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever faced a situation where someone underestimated you? Share your story in the comments. What did you think of Maya's transformation from paper pusher to admiral? Let us know which part of her story resonated with you the most. Your engagement helps us bring you more inspiring stories like this one. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Until next time, remember that sometimes the people who seem the quietest have the most powerful stories to tell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.